On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very delightful treat. She's a licensed psychotherapist and global leading expert in mindfulness, meditation, relationships, and well being, just to name a few. She has 2 decades of experience working with some of the world's most well known personalities, from international pop stars, athletes, TV personalities, to thought leaders and Fortune 500 CEOs. No big deal. She's been featured as an expert therapist and master life coach on A&E's Monster-in-Laws, TEDx, and Real Housewives, all of which she has stolen the show. Big facts. She empowers thousands of women weekly through her platform and online community, and her ability to use her unique approach that combines the best of practical psychology and Eastern mindfulness practices is second to none. She's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific mother and wife. Please welcome the wise, eloquent, and insightful, the stunning and abundant Terri Cole. How you doing, Terri?
Craig, who's following that intro? Nobody.
You feeling good? I elevated you?
You sure did. I'm excited.
Yeah. To be honest with you, you couldn't pay me $1 billion to be anywhere else right now. You and I started the chat before we hit record, and I was kind of giving you some context on some of my background. And right out the gate, you said something right away, and I was like, let's just save this. So for my listeners and my audience, about 4 or 5 million out, if you're not familiar with Terri, biggest suggestion, do a deep dive, play catch up, check out her content, all the stuff she has to offer. What I think is most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation, and we're going to dive in right before we hit record. I was telling you that I went through a very dark season to do what I'm doing now, and I've never had more fun or been aligned in my entire life. And then you hit it with kind of a name of that particular story. Is that right?
Yes, talking about anyone who's doing this in the passionate way that you are, passionate way that I am, where there's really nothing else I could do that would fulfill my dharma, right? This is what I'm meant to do. We've all been through some kind of a dark night of the soul, as Joseph Campbell would talk about, where it gets dark. You get to the bottom of the barrel. For me, it was kind of on my knees. I had a very shiny career as a talent agent for supermodels and celebrities. And this was my ambition, was like my drug back in the day, where I was like, I'm just gonna crush it, I'm just gonna kill it, I'm just gonna get it. And you also look at what was driving for me. If I now, of course, decades later, I can look and say, what was driving that? I was the fourth daughter to a very successful father who definitely needed a son. And I felt like I was born the wrong gender, and I was all kinds of chip on my shoulder, proving shit to people. And I think that what I thought was just ambition, like, hey, I'm running towards what I want. Through many years of therapy, I realized I was actually kind of running away from something, because those things can feel a lot alike, right? Where you're like, ambition, I'm climbing this ladder. And I kept thinking that the next level of success, the next famous person, the next amount of money, the next running an agency, like I'm going to have the feeling that
Mm.
I'm desperately seeking. And I think your story is probably similar, where you get to sort of the top of that mountain or that hill. And I'm like, crap, the feeling I'm seeking is not here. And I had a realization at the height of my career as a talent agent that that wasn't it. And that what I got really lit up about was my own therapeutic process. Got into therapy at 19, stopped drinking at 21 when I was a senior in college. Like, who the hell stops drinking your senior year of college? It's like the worst time ever.
Right.
But I figured if I could stop drinking then, I could just stop drinking. Right. And I also started drinking at like 11. So my feeling is I had a pretty good run 10 years at that age.
Hell of a run.
And yeah, it was a good run, so to speak, good in quotes. But what happened in that moment is I realized I need to make a change, and I'm going to make a change that no one's going to understand. Because what happened is I started only really caring about the mental health of my clients. So I didn't care about the movie deal or the Pantene contract or the things I was supposed to be like, yes,
Mm.
I was getting people in eating disorder clinics, drug treatment clinics, therapy. I cared about them as people. And I was like, I just have to get out of this toxic pit. So I did. And I remember when I told my father I was going to go to grad school, I was quitting my job and going to go to grad school. And he was like, literally, his words were, sounds weird. Sounds weird. I was like, Here's the thing, Dad. I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. I don't feel fulfilled. And for me, my happiness actually matters. And lucky for me, I don't need anything from you. So your support would be great, but I'm doing it whether you support me or not. And he eventually got on board,
Yeah.
but it was a hard change to make, right? Because no, people are like, why would you quit this amazing? Keep in mind, it was the 90s. Think
Right.
about how popular supermodels were.
Oh
The
yeah.
whole George Michael, what was happening, all the things. Those people were all my clients, basically. And so making the move to really have to be like, who am I? What are my values? What matters to me? And I really thought, dude, my life cannot be making supermodels richer. Like that can't be the purpose that I
Right.
have. So I literally applied to one grad school. I applied to NYU, which is pretty nervy, seeing as how I went to a crappy undergraduate school. And I was like, am I even going to get in? When I got in, I was like, well, crap, now I got to go, right? You're not getting into NYU and not going.
Mhm.
And of course, it was the best. And that was 25 years ago.
Wow. Where do I begin? Right. And I figured this out too recently, is that once you get to that mountain, most humans, they're thinking about one thing, that next mountain. Right. So what we learned there and what I learned the hard way, sounds like you did as well, is that to activate that lit soul that we're all chasing is not once we get the money, the relationship, the car, the watch, the career, whatever
Mhm.
the case may be. Ironically enough, you can activate the lit soul now by being high vibe, being in alignment, and then you end up manifesting the things that you thought you needed to activate that lit soul. It took me 35 years to figure this out, but
Mhm.
over the last 2 years, I've grown more, had more fun, more success. How I define success than I did the previous 35 combined. And I'm with you, and I want to help other people do that as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Shifting, though, changing. I think that, when you think about the human condition, we have a natural, visceral, biological fear of change.
Mm.
And it's normal, right? So we need to normalize our relationship to that fear. I like to say that, fear of success and fear of failure are two sides of the same coin, but the coin is fear of change. And I think that we have to start having a conversation about what happens when we change, right? We're leaving the thing we knew. It took me probably 3 years to leave entertainment and Hollywood and all the things I was doing because I knew what I was leaving, a boatload of money, right? And it's not like I was great with money. I didn't like
Yeah.
save a lot of money to be really secure in this new venture. I
Same.
literally had $900 in the bank, I think, What are we
But
going to say?
you're saying no, I was saying same. I made some poor decisions as well. But once you figured out that you were kind of empty inside and that you needed to really find why you were here, you're saying once you had that initial breakthrough, it then took 3 years to fully exit out and transition.
Yes, because
Wow.
entertainment is one of those businesses
Hmm.
that if you're good at it, they just keep offering you ridiculous amounts of cash to come back. I mean, I actually went after I graduated NYU, I actually got sort of sucked back into the vortex. I was going to just cover for someone. I was running the TV department at Ford Modeling Agency down in Green Street, and I was just going to come in because someone was on maternity leave, right? And that was going to be only like 2 months, which turned into 6 months. And I was building my therapy practice, and yet I have no regrets about doing it, right? Because I was getting married. Who can't use cash? Oh my gosh, look at who's here.
This is
Hi,
real, raw,
baby.
authentic, and organic. He's 10 weeks old.
Oh,
His name is Whiskey, and he insisted on saying hello to you because he's loving this conversation.
I love it, Whiskey. He's ready to evolve. Oh my God, stop. He's looking at you. Ah, so cute.
Please
Anyway,
continue.
getting out of entertainment is I feel like it's one of those things, and anyone who's ever been in it knows that it's like the dark, it's just
Mm.
a shiny object that can suck you back in. But for me, what ended up happening is that I ended up opening a private practice and then having all of these clients who knew I knew about entertainment, right? Because it's a very specific business. If you're an actor, if you're a singer, if you're a director, lighting person, it's a way of life that if you have never been in it, it's specific. I think it's probably similar to Wall Street. Like
Yeah.
people can imagine it, they can watch a movie, but if
Yeah.
you haven't done it, you
No.
don't actually know, you
Right.
know?
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds very familiar, actually. Um, Wow. How did you have the realization that there was a lot more out there for you that was more meaningful? And then also have the courage to realize that you can create a hybrid of making an impact, having a lot of fun and unapologetically making a lot of money too. Or when you transition, was money the last thing on your mind?
Well, money was, I always was good at making money. I wasn't the best at managing it, but I always figured
Fair
there's
enough.
always more where that came from, as my friend Marie Forleo would say. And so that was kind of my
Great.
mindset, right?
This is awesome.
Where I wasn't worried. Yeah, Marie's great. I wasn't worried about that per se. I knew I could be poor because money was never, I came from a very like kind of a family that didn't necessarily value
Mm-hmm.
um, material stuff. And in fact, I had to sort of fight against my mother's bias against rich people being a particular way and, money being the root of all evil and blah, blah. So it wasn't that. It was more about when you're sort of a type A doer,
We'll
being
call it.
masterful.
Yep.
Yeah, raise your hand. Being masterful matters.
Mm,
So I was a really good agent and I was really good at negotiating that world. So it really was me being willing to be in a learning curve, to have a beginner's mind, to not know something but learn. And I loved it once I got into it, of course. And I was like, Terri, you'll become masterful at this too, as long as you're willing to do the work, which of course I was. And as I was graduating grad school, like these very important things in my life all happened at the same time. First, and I call this getting my PhD in fear. So, first, I meet the man who would become my husband, Victor, and nothing would ever be the same again because I was kind of a gal who didn't want to get married. My parents' marriage was meh, not catastrophically horrible, but just sort of like not the greatest.
fair
My
enough.
mother, went to college for 2 months and then got pregnant with my sister, my oldest sister. I have three older sisters. And so in my mind, it's like, I would say marriage equated to the death of my mother's dreams. And somewhere consciously or unconsciously, that was definitely in my mind.
That's
And
deep.
my mother's overt and covert message to me was get an education, girl, and make your own dough
Mm,
so that love can be a choice and
mm,
not a need, right? You can choose it. So my back to the year of fear.
yep.
I meet Vic. He's widowed and divorced and has three acting out teenage sons and lives in Elizabeth, New Jersey, just to add some insult to the injury. And yet I literally did not care. I was like, oh, this is my family. These are my people. It was
Right.
amazing. I was so happy. And
Yep.
suddenly, I was like, this every day for eternity, sign
Yes,
me up.
please. Yes.
Yes, I want this, which is kind of funny because I would never have thought that. I mean, just when you find a person, because you recently found your person.
Right.
So we
Same
know this.
story. Well, not the same, but similar.
So very happy in that respect. And I was so psyched. He was going to meet my dad. It was so amazing. And then they missed each other that August. And we had only gotten together in July. And then we were going to do it again over Christmas. And my father dropped dead suddenly of a heart attack in November.
Yeah.
So this was quite shocking. He was only 64. It was like just, so there was that. And then as I was cleaning out my dad's house with my three older sisters in Florida, I noticed this like big lump in my throat. And I call my mother. I mean, she's not a doctor, but she thinks she is. So I was like, I got this thing. Like, what is this thing? And she said, oh, you know what, Tara, we have these things called goiters. It's like nothing. It's not a big deal. Go to your doctor. It's going to be fine. Obviously, it wouldn't be a story if it was a effing goiter. So
Right.
it was not. I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer, which is what my husband's wife
Oh,
died of
my
when
goodness.
the kids were 5, 3, and 9 months old. So this is so much more loaded than just being diagnosed with cancer. Like I finally found my people and now I get cancer.
And your dad
That was, hmm?
and your dad passed. Well, like almost
And
all.
then,
Yeah.
yes. And then the last event in the PhD in fear is Vic and I were going out. We had a friend come in from New York and we were going to drive him home. And I ran into the house quick because we had just come from a meeting. I ran into the house quick and I hear Vic say my name. like out the window, which is so weird because he's like a total mellow Pisces. He's never rushing me. He knew I was like, dude, I'm washing my hands. I'll be right out. So I come out of the house and it's like I could only see like the two little it was pitch black and the two lights of the car, those funnels sort of.
Mhm.
And I can't make sense of what I'm seeing because I see this huge figure that looks like a wedge wearing like a tank top. And then I look at the face because the boys were all very tall because they were teeny, young teens by this point. And I look at the face and this person has a stocking on their face and they're kneeling on Vic's back with a gun to the back of his head. So we actually got held up at gunpoint in our backyard. And even though nobody got shot, that was like the nail in the coffin for my year of fear,
I did not
where
know
my
that.
father died, I get diagnosed with cancer twice, and we get held up at gunpoint.
Wow.
That that series of events, of course, changed my life because I went from being a pretty bold person. I was pretty I would have considered myself sort of fearless, right? Like just doing my thing,
Yeah.
to being scared all the time. I was afraid to be alone in my house. And I knew if I don't figure this out, and of course I was in therapy, I had a trauma therapist, I was doing EMDR, I was doing all the things, but I realized that that fear lived inside of me. Like that was in my mind because, Vic got a tricked out system in the house. There was like a panic button behind the bed now where, like trying to make me feel safer. And I'm like, I need to face these demons myself and also get through the period of time where when you have, post trauma, there's a normal period of time where you're going to have intrusive memories or nightmares or an exaggerated startle response. Like there's certain things that just come along with having traumatic experiences. But that was something that was also a major wake up call. The cancer in particular, for am I living my best life? Is
Mhm.
this my purpose in life? And I really realized I wasn't. And that the realization in my early 30s that something could happen that might actually shorten this gift. This It's such a privilege to be alive. Like that, would I say I was living my best life? So I made a lot of changes around that time in my life in being so clear that I had a mission to help other people lessen their own suffering and elevate their own joy. And that's what I've done ever since.
I just love you. So there's that. This is unbelievable. You just took us on a ride, and there's a couple plot twists I didn't see coming. And for me, not the same, but I also did this eulogy exercise where I was like, if this was it for me, did I leave a legacy? Did I make an impact? Did I contribute? Did I give it my all? And right away, I was like, not even close. And I could not live with that. And so now, like, I don't really ever, I don't, I have my moments, but I don't really get too stressed because I immediately go back to what you just said. And when you were speaking, I actually felt it. It's like, if you woke up today, there's a million opportunities for you. Like, how bad can it be? You woke up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also based upon everything that you went through, I mean, one of those would have been a lot. Three, um, it just puts things in perspective. Like this human experience, forget about soul and spirit for a second. Like the human experience, like it's pretty short, and you don't know when your time is up, right? So what are you gonna do now to make the
Yeah.
most of it? Every second count, and to be around who you want to be around, to do what you want to do, and leave no stone unturned.
So true, Craig. I feel like the biggest shift, maybe psychologically, was that I realized I wasn't owed anything. I wasn't owed a moment of this life, that every moment that I get, that every day, that every experience, that every person I get the privilege of positively impacting is a gift. And I think that having cancer is something that, I mean, I wouldn't, as one of my best friends, Chris Carr, would say, I won't call it a gift because I wouldn't give it to you, but meaning cancer,
Right, I know you.
right? Let's not call it a gift per se. But I have to say, these pivots and these challenges that we experience in life are opportunities. And listen, this is also not to minimize other people's experiences, right? It isn't just about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. As a therapist, I can tell you, but it is knowing that there is guidance and that there is help. I find that one of the things that caused the most pain for my therapy clients in 25 years was this lack of having any clue how to create boundaries in their relationships. So I wrote a whole friggin' book about it called Boundary Boss right there,
Yeah.
because I would get the same questions over and over. And this was my own experience in my 20s in therapy, not understanding, like, why was I so resentful? Why did I feel put out? Why was I over functioning and over giving and overdoing for acceptance, for fear of rejection, for all of the things? And my therapy clients would always see it as like a fatal flaw in them. Like, am I just weak? Am I just conflict avoidant? Like, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, dude, this is like, would you feel bad that you weren't fluent in French if nobody taught you how to speak French?
Yeah.
You wouldn't. You'd be like, oh, let me just get a great teacher. Let me just put in the time. Let me decide it is my intention that I will learn how to do this. And I feel like that's something that is foundational in people wanting to create what you're talking about, what you've created, right? Requires the internal boundaries it took you to decide you would leave a very profitable life and grind. And the thing that people think, what the grind is, but people look at that Wall Street job as like, whoa, it's shiny and sexy and expense accounts and bonuses and cars and all the things. And hey, those things also exist. But you lived through and understand also the shadow side of that. And for you, the car and the watch and the bonus was not fulfilling your soul's purpose, right? Or your dharma or your purpose in life. It wasn't filling you up in a way that felt meaningful, right? And so I think that there's something about, obviously, I wrote a whole book on it, but boundaries are very much our ability to, the way that I would have you think about boundaries is your own personal rules of engagement. It lets other people know what's okay with you, what's not okay with you. But to do that, you have to know your own preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, like your non negotiables. And I find that especially the women in my practice not only don't know them, right? But if they do know them, they have no ability to honestly, transparently communicate them because there's so much onus put on us to be a good girl, be a good boy, turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Think about the way, especially women, were raised. Most of us were raised and praised to be self-abandoning codependents, but that doesn't have you create a life that makes you happy.
Yeah, this is so good. And it's something that I had to learn over the last couple of years. It's like if you're not setting boundaries, then you're out of integrity and abandoning yourself. But in
Yes.
order to set boundaries, you have to identify what they need to be. And first of all, the whole audience should grab your book immediately. But my like how I identify them is like what feels good and what doesn't, right? Like if I'm with someone and oftentimes I leave that interaction like in a lowered frequency or not feeling good about myself, then I need to step away, right? And I have to protect, I have to be in integrity with honor myself. Because
Yes.
like if I'm showcasing to people like if it's not a hell yes and it's a hell no, but I'm
Mm.
not doing it, what does that say about me? And then also it reminds me of like I never really used to understand, but now I do. Like on the airplanes, when you put your oxygen mask on first, you fill your cup up first because if you're not like functionable, how can you help anyone else, right?
Yes. When people are, here's the thing with boundaries, though, I feel like there's a lot of confusion
Yes.
around what they are and what it means. And people will be like, I don't even know. So I actually have a really great 13 question quiz that will help you get your boundary baseline. Just go to boundaryquiz.com. It's
Put
completely
in the show
free.
notes too. Yeah.
Yes, which it'll tell you, because some people are more like chameleons with their boundaries. Some people are more like the ice queen with their boundaries. Like there's different ways that boundaries can be disordered. It's not just being a pushover. It's not just being a peacekeeper. And I feel like with women, those are the ones that people identify with the most. But it's also disordered if you are quicker to cut someone off or ghost them than you are to tell them they hurt your feelings. That's a disordered emotional boundary.
Ooh,
When you just cut someone off, that's having rigid boundaries. So there's rigid boundaries, which are too hard,
wow.
porous boundaries, which are too malleable. And then, of course, in the middle are healthy boundaries, which there's a certain flexibility to having healthy boundaries. But I think that the myths around this can be very confusing. So anybody listening who's like, I don't friggin' know, where do I start? Like, what, how do I even know? I think that we should all do a resentment inventory.
Mm,
So this is going to tell you, and you know it. We could both do one right now. Like, even when you're doing well, even when you've had a lot of therapy, or even when you feel like you're on this, like a self reflective path where you know who you are to a degree, and there's always more, we still, I mean, nobody's perfect. But if your boundaries are really disordered or you feel like you just don't have any, then you have a lot of resentment. So what you're going to do is you're going to write down, you're going to feel, okay, who am I holding resentment for right now? And then we're going to write down who's the person, why, like what is happening? Because here's the thing, when we feel resentment, usually a boundary has been crossed, a boundary needs to be established. Because sometimes, listen, people don't know. Like we could in our mind be like, Betty from the office is a boundary bully, right? But if you've never said anything to Betty about the way she oversteps, then you're colluding with Betty's bullshit behavior,
so true.
right? Like we have to be able to know. So anyway, you're going to write down, I have a resentment with my sister. The resentment is, and I actually put this example in the book because it's true. She would use my key to come over to my apartment in the city and like take my clothes and not tell me. Now, here's the thing, we share clothes. My whole thing was just give me a heads up. Because if I'm
Yeah.
looking for something that you took that I don't know you have, that's friggin' annoying. So just let me know. And what is the boundary that's needed? The boundary that's needed is you make the simple request that she let you know. Well, I did that a bunch of times and she still didn't let me know. So then I had to add a consequence to the boundary that said, hey, if you go to my apartment again without letting me know and take my stuff, I'm going to take back your key, which
Ooh,
makes me really sad because then that means we can't share clothes anymore. But this is how important it is to me. And I've asked you multiple times. So we find a way to establish the boundary. A lot of times, all you have to do is make a simple request because the person does not know unless you say something. And sometimes you make the request and the person goes, oh my God, thank you for letting me know.
first of
Right?
all,
We don't always get pushback, you know?
I can confirm because I recently started telling people how I feel in a very like mature and nice way, something I would never do. Back in the day, actually really for 36 years, who am I kidding? I would be more of the type of cat, all right, I'm not available for that person. Or like someone cuts me
Hmm.
off, or I don't want to talk about it. But now recently, I started saying like, I just want to be straight up with you and speak from the heart. Something that you've been doing has made me feel less than I'd like to feel, and here's why. And I just wanted to let you know where I was at. And the feedback and the responses that I have been getting have been so understanding, and like
Mm-hmm.
it actually strengthened the relationships. And it's like, why haven't I been doing this the whole time? Well, I probably wasn't available yet myself because I'm working on myself all
Right.
the time. But I think that's so important for the audience to understand, like the way you just worded at the end, like you'd be surprised the pushback won't be so bad. And that's not me. It's not going to be 100 out of 100, of course.
Of
But
course.
if you explain yourself in a manner, sometimes they're very understanding and it can actually strengthen a relationship.
Without a doubt. But here's the thing. If we're saying yes when we want to say no, or sort of stepping back from someone, like becoming unavailable, like you said,
Yep.
we are giving people in our lives corrupted data about who we are. So we want closer relationships. But when we don't establish boundaries, when we don't tell the truth about how we feel, about what's happening, about something that might be bothering us, what we're really doing is giving them bad intel. And we're going to get more of the same. because they literally can't read our minds. So people think sometimes about boundaries as being blocks to deeper intimacy, but I'm an expert in this field, and I
Yeah.
promise you, boundaries are bridges to the best relationships you will ever curate in your life. The most trustworthy, because we all know the people pleasers. We know them. The friend who's like, I'm definitely going to be at your party. I say to my husband, if I know this friend is a people pleaser, oh, so and so said she's definitely coming. So that's like a 48% chance she'll be here. We know you. And here's the thing, I have friends who are people pleasers. I love them, but I do not trust them. You know why? They're not emotionally trustworthy. My friends who tell the truth, those people I trust because they know they don't need to blow sunshine out my ass, or they don't need to placate me. They're doing it for their own comfort, not for what's best for the relationship. So I feel like that's a different, exactly what you said before, Craig, about how you're finding people are like, hey, thanks for letting me know.
Thanks for the
I
feedback.
was unaware, right?
Yeah. Or if they don't say thank you, maybe they have a little too much pride. The way they respond, you can tell like it moved them, or they understood where you were coming from.
Or maybe they just stopped the annoying behavior.
Correct. Even better.
Exactly. What do they say? The only apology is change behavior, like for real.
Yeah.
Right. So people don't have to. I feel like this with the explanation too. I find that the people pleasers in my crew, if they have to say no to something, a lot of times they feel like they got to write a whole mother effing dissertation on why they're saying no. And I think that we need to have an internal shift first. The most important thing to you has to be what you think, how you feel, and what you want. To you, it has to be more important to you than what your fiance thinks, feels, wants. Because here's the thing, in long-term relation, of course, we're going to compromise. Of course, you care about how she feels and what she wants and what she thinks. But how you feel and what you want and what you think is your responsibility. And so we have to know those things because that's how we'll be in healthy relation to other people. Because if not, a lot of times with people pleasers, we're looking for others to fill up a part of us that only self-love and self-knowledge can fill. So we set people up to fail, right? Because there's a part of you, and you've been tapping into it, you've been filling it up, you've been doing it with the work that you're doing, but that only you can do for you, right? Self-love in a real way. And I hate the way, honestly, there's so much about self-love that's out there in the wellness space
Yeah.
that just love yourself more. People are like, what the hell does that mean? Like, can someone tell me what more self-love is? And it's relating to yourself, holding yourself in high esteem, not talking badly about yourself, not putting yourself down to make other people feel comfortable. Literally loving yourself the way you would a child that you adored.
Yeah.
That's what self-love is. And that means having boundaries, being able to communicate effectively, not doing a whole bunch of crap you don't want to do all the time under the guise of being nice, because you end up resentful as hell. So it's not nice, right? In the end, you're resenting that person. They don't even know why.
Yeah.
So we're responsible for that,
100%. This is so good. This is awesome because of course, preparation breeds confidence, and I have a list of stuff that we want to touch upon. Haven't we've just been 100% organic. These are the best types of conversations. So let me just ask you this. So you shouldn't be a people pleaser and do things that you don't want to do, because then you end up stirring up resentment anyway, and nobody feels good about it. So where do you draw the line of doing certain things that you don't necessarily want to do, but maybe it's your parents,
Yep.
right? Or maybe it's your in-laws, or whatever the case may be. And
Yep.
you know you should do the right thing, but you're really just not in the mood, or something like that.
Well, with relationships, right, to have lasting love in our lives, there will always be a need to compromise, to meet in the middle. For example, my husband really loves classical music, like loves it. I, girl from Jersey, I'm not that into it. But here's the thing, I'm super into him. I
Mm.
want him to be happy. So when he's like, literally this weekend, we're going to Bruckner's Ninth or something. He's so pumped, can't stop telling me about it, when the composer wrote it, all the things. I go lovingly and honestly, happily, because it makes Vic happy. So that's a choice that I make. There are other things that he does without me because I really don't want to do it. But most of the time, you can find a way. I want my mother to be happy. So I do things because I'm a dutiful daughter. I do things, not all the things. Trust me, she'd like to see me more than once a week, but I see her once a week. We have lunch. I talk to her every freaking day, but I want to do that. So I think that part of what we're talking about is you have to decide. This is where the nuances and boundaries come in, because is it a preference? Then we can compromise.
Yeah.
Are you setting a limit? Okay, can they agree with the limit? Is it a deal breaker? Right? When I was dating, before I met my husband many years ago, I stopped drinking when I was young. And so when my friends were trying to set me up with people, I said, but nobody in the rooms, like nobody in recovery, because one addict in a relationship is enough, and that's me. Like, and I remember one of my friends being like, "Oh my God, you're judging addicts? What a hypocrite you are," or something. And I was like, dude, that's my deal breaker. I don't care if you don't understand it. I know myself. One person with addiction issues in a relationship that I'm in is enough, and that person is me. So, in knowing our own deal breakers, you have a right to whatever that non negotiable is for you. And your obligation is to communicate it. So, where we draw the line is, if something is a preference, we can compromise. If we're setting a limit, we can compromise some, right? There's movement. And you have to know yourself well enough to know somebody being unfaithful. Is that a deal breaker? If it is, you need to communicate that, and you need to have those agreements in your relationship. So you both are sharing what are the deal breakers, because what you're sensitive to has everything to do with how you were raised. What I'm sensitive to has everything to do with how I was raised. But each and every person listening to this has a right to our specific boundaries that we want.
Yeah. Bye. This is awesome. This is a tremendous conversation. I know I'm better for it. I know the audience will too. I want to hit you with a couple of your hits, um, because I think they're so valuable for the audience, and I think they're awesome topics. And I was checking out your content, which I highly suggest everybody do immediately following this conversation. And one of the things you said was you were talking about how to identify and manage an emotional trigger. And I imagine some people get triggered and they don't even realize that it's a trigger. But maybe
Mhm.
if you help them identify it, they could transform from reactive to proactive and maybe do something about the situation.
Love it. So, how do we know? Right. So, Dr. Shafali.
Yeah, we just had her on like a month ago. She's awesome.
Oh my God. So, she's one of my besties too. And she has this brilliant thing she says about triggers. All of your triggers reside within you. So, meaning, if someone is being a total jerk and you get angry, that's not you being triggered. That's you responding in a super appropriate way to someone being an idiot, right? Triggered means that our response is amplified in some way, that we are very mad or very upset about something and it happens very quickly. You can tell that you're being triggered because it's almost like you don't have control over it. Something happens and suddenly you are so mad. So, how you're going to figure this out, because we need to know what 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 part of our own lived experience is creating that trigger. So if you have a traumatic experience or a traumatic childhood, or if you had an alcoholic parent who would get drunk and then become violent, you would be very sensitive, probably, to the people or your partner getting drunk, because you have that in your cells, that experience, especially if you haven't worked that out in therapy or in trauma therapy. And so, does that mean your partner shouldn't drink? Does that mean you should have a conversation? about it. Like, what does that mean? Because you may have that same experience, even though your partner has never been violent. You may still have that jacked up fear that it could happen. And so, this is why therapy matters. This is why knowing our triggers matters. So, what do you do when you are triggered? Well, it's much easier to identify our triggers when we're not in the middle of it. So, I would suggest doing an inventory, right? Taking a look at what are the things that really get you upset in that way that I described, which is very fast. Like something happens and now you're off to the races where it's like from 0 to 100 and you're not even sure why you're so mad. Usually that means you're responding. It's like having a transference, which means you're responding in present time to unresolved injuries or wounds from the past. So I think it's important that we know what those wounds are. And it's also okay to ask your partner to be sensitive, or your friends or whoever. Like, Craig, these things, these experiences, these wounds, hopefully we do work on them so they're not actively hot, right? They're not sticky, but they also are going to be hopefully woven into the tapestry, this very unique tapestry of your life. So I grew up having an emotionally unavailable father, right? So any commercial with a father and a daughter, even to this day, even 30 years of therapy later, I'm going to have I might get a little choked up, like, oh, that's so sweet. I'll always have a tenderness around what I didn't get as a little girl. Now, I worked on my relationship with my father before he died. I did the best that I could. It's okay. But that makes me, right? So it isn't like anytime you have that kind of a trigger, like, oh my God, we need to eradicate it. No, but we do need to integrate it. So I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's so funny because I lived under this frame or map, if you will, for so
Hmm.
long. And I've been doing personal development 15 years. I finally put it all together in the lockdown and realized it's my life. I'm gonna make it my life. But I
Hmm.
I, I was stubborn, or I am stubborn. I'm working through it. And I was always under the impression that like I'm just not available for the negative. I'm only available for the positive. But through becoming friend and speaking to great people like you and doing my own work and Dr. Shafali and so forth, like you can't let these things just go because they always tend to resurface. I
Yes.
imagine that's one of the points of therapy is to work
Hmm.
through them. And I'm the first to admit that I was wrong. And you got
Hmm.
it when you acknowledge that these things are there. That's like a flashlight. Like this needs to be worked on, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing. It doesn't mean we need to talk about third grade for 5 years, right?
Yeah.
It means if there is something from third grade that is negatively impacting your lived experience today, that is something that needs your attention. So it's not like we got to go back and do the whole, some therapists are like, let's talk about your childhood forever. I
Right.
never was that. I was like, let's talk about anything that is getting in the way of you creating the life you want now. Let's talk about that because I don't want anything blocking you.
Yeah. This is awesome. Straight up. Another nugget, and we'll land the plane. I saw you talking about, and it made me feel some type of way. You said never underestimate the courage and strength it takes to try, right? And when I see people in the arena, so to speak, whatever arena that is, and really going for it, even if they're not succeeding, I'm compassionate to them because I know what it takes to be a beginner again and try something new. Why is that important to you as well? Why is that something you like to talk about?
Because I think that we get stuck in this perfectionism and this achieving and this hustle culture.
Mm.
And when you really think about what life is, we're all just in life school. There's always a way for you to have a beginner's mind about something. Don't be so afraid to make mistakes that you don't get the luscious variety that this life has to offer you, right? So try. You'll fail, quote unquote. And I look at my life and think of all the things I tried and did very well at and tried at failed or didn't pursue. But I don't look at those things as failures, right? I look at those things as my life experience, and all of it belongs. All of it is in the successes and the failures, the light and the dark. All of it is in. So allow yourself to try. Be silly, get it wrong, but live, right? Because that is what living is trying.
Right. And there's a big difference between failing and being a failure, right? Like
Yes.
failing means you're trying, failure is finite.
Right. We're learning. And another thing though that I do think is important with trying and failing is, are you willing to learn from the painful, from the traumatic, from the losses? That every shit stew that you've experienced in your life has gems of wisdom for your own evolution. If you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty and go in there and go, how was I changed by being held up at gunpoint, by the death of a young niece, by even things that you want to be like, nothing good could ever come out of this? That isn't true, because growth is there for you. And there's nothing disloyal about growing from those experiences.
I agree. And I believe that to be true. If you're available to identify what message or lesson that you can extract from even the darkest of situations, they're always there. And then you
Yep.
look back a little bit later on, and you're like, wow, had that not happened, I wouldn't be doing this or wouldn't have met this person. But you have to be available for it. And then once you have that mindset, it makes it a little bit less tough when you're going through some shit, for lack of better words, that you may not be
Mm-hmm.
able to know why now, but at some point this might be protecting or promoting or propelling you to something greater. I couldn't help but think, and I often wonder this, but I never actually said it out loud. When you and I were talking, and you're like, your story, it's the dark night of the soul. Is that what you called it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most people's epic stories come after disappointment and heartbreak or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Do you think you can make such a quantum shift or such massive change had you have you not gone through something that really brings you to your knees, so to speak, or you need that pain as the portal, so to speak?
I think that a lot of the changes in my own life, I anything from stopping drinking to changing careers, I think those things might have happened, but they wouldn't have happened as soon as they did. I think that trauma, from a therapeutic point of view, I'm positive that traumatic experiences open this window of transformation where with therapy clients, I can do like 2 years of work in 6 months, because all of our natural, when the world falls apart for us, when the rug is ripped out, all of our natural defenses are down. Our day to day, get up, grind through, drop, do it again. All of that is down when you're in some kind of a traumatic or dramatic situation. And so the opportunity for growth is massive. So I can't say conclusively other than I wouldn't personally undo any of the traumatic experiences that I've had
Same.
because I love my life.
Yeah, same. I could talk to you for 10 hours straight. Best part for me is I know my intuition serves me right. It's just the beginning of the friendship. This
Mm-hmm.
is so much fun, and there's so many other places we can take it. These are the most specials when it's just like a real organic conversation, and I think those are the most valuable for the audience. The audience is exploding. The community is very loyal and engaging. I think I know the answer, but what's the best way for them to all support you? And what are you most excited about right now?
Super excited about my Boundary Boss Boot Camp, which I'm doing live in at the end of May.
At
So
the end
that's
of the day?
exciting. End of
Okay,
May.
cool.
And I also have a whole free series that's happening before that, which will be great. So you guys, if you follow me on Instagram, it's just at Terri Cole. You'll see I'm doing 3 lives, just teaching you everything you need to know about boundaries. And then if people want to join the course, they can join the course.
Okay.
Um, I'd say the best place to find me. I also have a podcast I've had for 7 years, the Terri Cole Show, which when your book comes out, you have to come on my show.
I would love to. Done.
Done. So yeah, so you guys can find me there. And you can also just go to my website too, which is terricole.com.
I love it. And also, this just came to me. If you're up for it,
Mm-hmm.
whoever has the best takeaway and nugget from this conversation, shoot me a message and story it and tag Terri and I, and Terri will send you one signed copy of her book, Boundary
Yes,
Boss.
she
You up
will.
for that?
Happily. Happily. Yes, I love it. Look at us just spontaneously doing a giveaway. Right on.
That's it. You're awesome. Terri, hang up on one sec. I want to connect with you after. I want you to know you're the definition of being in alignment, transformation, and unbelievable energy. I could personally guarantee that your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets today.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
I mean, that was too much fun.
That was so easy.
That's a good word for it. That was like, seems like we've known each other for 20 years.
As soon as I saw some of your stuff, I was like, "Oh, I know this dude. I don't know where you're from, but I feel I want to be like you're from Jersey. You're not. You're probably from New York somewhere, but
Yeah. Terry, let's stay connected. I'd love to build a friendship.
let's.
Yeah.
Excellent.
What else can I do to support?